All right, all right. I know what you're thinking. Where the hell was my podcast this morning? I'm sorry, but I'm going to be changing the way we do things a little bit. All right, I'm going to change up a little bit about the way that Ball Don't Lie works. If that's all right with you, not that I don't know that you really have a choice, but this is how we're going to do things a little bit, or this is how we're going to do things from here on out. You know what? Let's get into it. Let's go. Hi, hello, and welcome in to the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 137. My name is Austin Elmore. Happy to be here with you, and thank you for being here. The podcast is a little bit late today, if you're one of those people who listens to it every Wednesday morning as soon as you wake up or whatever it might be. I've decided to make a change. Last week was kind of the final straw for me. I normally will record the podcast on Tuesday mornings, edit it, and then it posts at 5 o'clock on Wednesday morning, 5 a.m. I've decided to change and record and post and edit everything on Wednesday mornings. So it's still going to populate your feed on Wednesdays. It's just not going to populate it until maybe between 11 o'clock and noon or 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, kind of depending on the day. But it's not going to be as soon as you wake up on Wednesday mornings. I apologize for that. If you're a morning listener, maybe you can move it to Thursdays. Hopefully it doesn't interfere with any other podcast. But because of the way the season structure, the weekly structure works with the Bengals, not only in the offseason, but also going into the regular season, I've decided that I'm going to do everything on Wednesdays, post it on Wednesday, and go from there. So it's still going to show up on Wednesday, just going to be a little bit late. I'm sorry again for a lack of communication, poor communication. Basically, I didn't know until afterwards because if you remember, a week ago, I did this whole thing about Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals, and then Trey showed up. Trey showed up to Cincinnati and had all these different things to say in a 30-minute conversation with the Cincinnati media. And so I kind of missed out on being able to talk about that. And the schedule gets released and all of that. And so I wanted to wait an extra day, an extra 24 hours for all the stuff that might happen on a Tuesday that I can talk about on a Wednesday and moving forward. And perfectly enough, we heard from Joe Burrow yesterday. We heard from Zach Taylor yesterday. And you're going to hear from both of them during our show today, during the episode today of Ball Don't Lie. Let's start with Trey. Trey shows up to Bengals practice kind of unprompted last Tuesday, and he's not wearing any Bengals gear. He looks like he just walked off the golf course. He, at one point, called a member of the media over, basically saying, "Hey, I want to talk. I want to voice my opinion, and that's why I'm here today." And they said, "Okay." And so towards the end of practice, Trey walks over to the scrum, the media scrum, as they call it, which is all the media members standing there, and proceeds to take questions for the next 25 minutes and tries his best to clear the air. This is a day after he issued a statement. We talked about that statement on the podcast last week. And there was a sticking point that Trey kind of talked about, that Zach Taylor had sent him a text saying, "Hey, just a reminder, if you're not here for mandatory workouts in June, you will be fined." And that seemed to be what set Trey Hendrickson off and what made him angry and what led to him showing up to Cincinnati, wanting to talk to the media and wanting to share his side of things. He says there's been no conversation post-draft, and he doesn't feel like the offers that have been made to him are in line with the conversations that they had previously. That's Trey's side of things. He also seems to be very upset and says that it's personal that Zach Taylor texted him telling him he would be fined. I have a problem with this with Trey. Number one, Trey's point was that Zach texting him and telling him that he would be fined for not showing up to mandatory minicamp in June was an indicator that the organization had no plans on negotiating further or communicating further. The first part of that Trey is wrong is that Zach Taylor has nothing to do with the negotiations. He's not involved. He doesn't talk about it. Like I'm sure, gets updates from the front office, like, are we getting anywhere with Trey? What's our status? And so on. But Zach Taylor is not involved in negotiations at all for the Cincinnati Bengals. Head coaches in this organization do not involve themselves in contract negotiations. So Trey being offended by that, number one, shows his ignorance towards the entire contract situation. And you could say that there's been a lot of ignorance from the Hendrickson side when it comes to his contract negotiations. So that first and foremost rubbed me the wrong way, because he then says it gets personal with Zach Taylor because Zach texted him this. The other part of that I think is silly from Trey Hendrickson is that Zach gave him a month's heads up. Training camp isn't, or mini camp isn't, for another month. The mandatory mini camp that Trey is required to be at contractually is not for another month. So his boss essentially sends him a text a month ahead of time and says, hey, just a reminder, we have this mini camp, and if you're not here, you will be fined. That is not a Bengals policy. It is not the Bengals saying, hey, if you're not here, you'll be fined. That is a collectively bargained policy by the NFL Players Association. It is written into the contract between the Players Association and the league that if players don't show up to mandatory minicamp, they will be fined. Zach is explaining that, trying to explain that to Trey. We don't know the full depth of the text messages. And if I were Trey Hendrickson, who seems to be as transparent as possible, send out the screenshots. If you think this was such an egregious play by one of the nicest people on the planet, if it was so egregious, why don't you show the screenshots? Why don't you post the screenshots of your conversation with the coach and talk about how egregious it was? So it's not a Bengals policy. It is an NFL and NFL Players Association policy that his Players Association collectively bargained with the league. And your boss, in my mind, is doing you a solid by giving you a heads up. Hey, you will be fined if this doesn't, if you aren't here. And that's the rules that you and your group agreed to. So to me, just insane that Trey reacted the way he did. I still don't quite understand that at all. Okay. So that's what happened last Tuesday. And I thought Trey kind of sitting there and asking all these questions and talking about his family endlessly, to me, it rubbed me the wrong way. He also did it during practice, which I think is disrespectful to your teammates, disrespectful to your coaches, disrespectful to your organization. But I do understand that Trey has a point that he's trying to prove. And the biggest point that he made last Tuesday was, hey, I'm going to be a distraction, right? I'm going to show up to practice. I'm going to take all the media. I'm going to answer a bunch of questions. People aren't going to focus on the football. I'm going to say these things. I'm going to air out our dirty laundry. I'm going to throw my coach under the bus because I'm happy. AKA, he's like a toddler screaming and stomping his feet and getting mad because the Bengals aren't giving him what he wants. So, what are the Bengals giving him? Well, we finally got some details on that. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk posted the details of the Trey Hendrickson negotiations, at least some of them. Now, say what you want about Mike Florio. I trust him when it comes to stuff like this. He says what he's been told is that the Bengals have offered him in the range of $28 million a year for an extension with Trey Hendrickson. If you've been listening to this podcast, or if you've been listening to Cincy 360 at all, you would know I've been telling you that's about the maximum. That's about as far as the Bengals will probably go, and I expected that to be the range that they would try to negotiate. $28 million is right on par with that. It's also right on par for making him one of the highest paid defensive ends in the NFL, certainly in the top 10. Trey said in that scrum of media last week that he wants a long-term extension. He wants stability and knowing where he and his family are going to be. Let me just say this. I think there is no bigger piece of, that is such bullshit. Continually going on about your family, to me, is nonsense. You've been in the National Football League now for a long time, and you know, as a professional football player, that your life could be upended, it could be uprooted, you could be moved at any moment, you could be traded. By the way, Treys asked for a trade twice now, and his child is a very, very young child. It's not like they're pulling him out of school. It's not like they have all this other stuff they have to do. I understand moving and going across the country and whatever it might be, that's difficult for anybody. But it's a lot less difficult for NFL players who have millions of dollars and have teams and agents to help them move, to help them get settled quickly. So the whole thing about knowing where me and my family are going to be, to me, is nonsense. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for them because people have to get up and move all the time. People have to move for jobs that they don't want to go to or jobs that they don't want to have to do, and they have to uproot their families all the times. And those people aren't millionaires. So I don't have any sympathy for a guy when it comes to that. Yes, that's hard, but guess what, dude? That's life. I understand you want some sort of indication of where the future is going to go and what it's going to look like. Everybody wants that. But also, you signed up for this life. And you've signed short-term extensions for the last couple of years that have put you in this situation. That's your fault for agreeing to those deals. And going on continuously about your family, to me, is just strange. And I don't know if you're trying to get sympathy there. I understand you're trying to show the importance of your family, and Trey talks about that a lot. But to me, that falls on deaf ears. Like, I just don't quite understand that. Like, I understand you want to take care of your family. I get that. But acting as if you don't know where they're going to be tomorrow, or you're under contract for this year. And then you have a whole offseason to figure out what it's going to be and talk to other teams and figure out interest and figure out where you want to go. Like, I just think that is a lame excuse. And I'm quite frankly tired of hearing about it. So anyways, Trey says that the Bengals are pushing a short-term extension pretty hard. That makes sense for the Bengals financially. It makes sense for the Bengals from a football standpoint. Trey wants a long-term extension. I don't know what the definition of long-term is. Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? What exactly is his definition of long-term? We still don't have the answer to that. The Bengals' definition, or what he's saying is a short-term extension, I would assume, is another year tacked on to what they currently have, which he's set to make $16 to $20 million, $16 million this year. I think it's a $20 million cap hit, and then his contract is over. So the Bengals are probably saying, hey, we'll give you $28 million a year this year, next year, and then we're done. And Trey's probably saying, I want $30 to $35 million because that's what the top edge rushers are getting, and I want it for 3 years, not 2. And the Bengals are probably laughing, saying, there's no chance in hell we're going to give you that. So that's the latest on the Bengals. Like, that is the biggest, that's the details on Trey Hendrickson. That's what we know, right? He talked to the media, said this, said that the Bengals are pushing a short-term extension, said that Zach Taylor texted him. He's worried about moving his family. He wants this all over, and there's been no communication. The Bengals basically have said at some point Trey needs to figure out what makes him happy. We're offering him we're offering him an extension worth $28 million a year. We think that's fair. We're not going to budge from that. Trey is then saying, okay, well, I don't think that's fair, and I'm going to throw a fit about it until you pay attention. That's where we're at. Kind of annoying, right? I'm kind of annoyed by it. For me personally, whether it's this podcast or my day job, it's great content. How could you possibly not love the content of Trey and the Bengals getting into a pissing contest? But it is certainly annoying, to say the least. And the Bengals don't seem all that upset about it. The Bengals don't seem all that upset about it. One of the other things that was supposed to happen last week was Joe Burrow meeting with the media. Well, that's been pushed back. It was pushed back a week because the Bengals wanted I'm not really sure why. Not really sure why Joe's conversation was pushed back a week. Maybe to give them time to come up with a plan on messaging about Trey and doing it a week later. So yesterday, Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor both met with the media in a press conference, and it's the first time we've talked to Joe since the end of the football season, since January, and there's obviously a lot to talk about. So without a doubt, Trey Hendrickson was going to get brought up. unbelievably, he didn't get brought up until 7 minutes into the conversation. But I wanted to play a bit of a snippet of what Joe said. This is about a minute of Joe talking about Trey Hendrickson and where they are at.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. You know, you guys all know how I feel about Trey. He's a great player. I love Trey as a guy. He goes out and plays well every single Sunday. He's very productive. He's a guy that deserves to get paid and get paid what he wants and what the market is. So, you know, like I said, we'll see what happens with that. But you know, I love Trey and hope he's with us. Here and there. Early in the offseason, quite a bit. You know, lately not quite as much. He was here last week, obviously, as you guys know. That was an exciting day. And, you know, it was great to see him. He came in and brought good energy. He was happy to see everybody. And like I said, I love Trey. I love seeing Trey. He's one of the most unique people I've ever been around or met, and I love that about him. And I think that's what makes him a great player. So he brings a unique energy that I'm always excited to see.
So there's Joe Burrow, basically towing the company line, not ruffling any feathers, says he loves Trey. You know how I feel about Trey. Means a lot to me, means a lot to us, and so on. And also says that he finds him to be a very unique person. Now, the tone of which Joe Burrow talked about Trey Hendrickson does not quite match the tone of the way he talked about T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. He's like, we'll see what happens with Trey. I really like Trey. He's a really good player. He's a really unique person. Did you notice that part? Joe said he's a very unique person. I believe the exact quote, the most unique person I've ever been around, I think is what Joe said, or one of the most unique people I've ever met. Let's read between the lines there. I'm not trying to put words in the guy's mouth, but I've heard from people that if Trey Hendrickson doesn't play again for the Bengals, the locker room's not going to be that upset about it. That's just what I've heard. You know, I don't know if that's true. That's just something I've heard. Trey's a really unique guy. I don't know that he really is a leader on the team. He's never been voted a team captain. I don't think he's a real vocal leader in the locker room. I think he's a guy who, yeah, is unique and has unique interests, but I think he's a guy who struggles to relate to his teammates and kind of does his own thing. And I think a little bit of that is Joe Burrow. Joe was like that early on as well, but he's kind of grown into being the space of the franchise, having to be more of a leader, having to be more relatable to the rest of his teammates. But to me, I thought that was notable. Not nearly the same language in the way that he talked about T and Jamar. Yes, he said he wants them and hopes he's with them, but also said he's really unique and a great guy. And the second part of that was asked if he'd communicated with Trey and said here and there, not as much lately, and so on. That's a different tone than what we heard about T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And we were kind of waiting for this press conference Tuesday to try to figure out, okay, is Joe going to double down? Is he going to be just as aggressive with Trey as he was with the wide receivers? And we talked about extensively the power that Burrow has in the franchise. The essential GM, the director of football operations, the way that nobody has made mountains move like Joe Burrow has since he's been in Cincinnati. And would he wield that power again when it came to Trey Hendrickson? And it didn't seem like he did. He was also asked about that. He was asked about, him having an impact on those deals getting done with T and with Jamar, and if that can have an impact on a trade deal getting done. Take a listen to what Joe said.
I don't know. I hope not a lot. I think when you have two guys like that, like I've said, you draft, they play great for you. We win a lot of games. They're very productive. Those are guys that you want to reward, and I'm glad they're here.
Why do you hope not a lot?
That's not really the position I want to be in.
That's interesting, isn't it? all of a sudden, no. I hope I'm not, in that position. I hope I'm not. I don't have that much power. I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be LeBron James making roster decisions. And if it works out, then great. And if it doesn't, then everybody blames me. I don't want to be seen as a diva. I don't want to be seen as the guy who's running the organization. Well, he said T's a need about T. Higgins. He used language previously that put pressure on the organization to get the job done. And now, with most of his needs met, Joe's changed his tune a little bit. I'm not surprised by this, but some people are. I've never felt like the Bengals and Joe and the team in and of itself are so invested in Trey Hendrickson and needing him to be a part of the team. I think they like him. I think they want him. I don't know that they're willing to go up there and swing for the fences when it comes to Trey, both the front office and the players and the coaches. Trey has deserved and does deserve a contract extension. He deserves a pay raise. He absolutely does. But you will never be able to convince me that he deserves the same amount of money as Max Crosby and Myles Garrett and so on. I just don't see them as the same type of player. And I can't see Trey and the athlete that he is having such a big impact moving forward that it would be worth the money. And the Bengals now, because the money that they've invested, have to be especially careful in the way they spend it and the way they draft. They've hired a couple more scouts so that they can maximize the window that is currently left. The Bengals defense stunk last year with Trey Hendrickson. There's a halfway decent chance they'll stink without Trey Hendrickson. Zach Taylor came to the media conference room. What am I trying to say? The press conference. Zach Taylor came to the podium. That's what I was trying to say. After Joe Burrow. And I think it's fair to describe Zach as terse when he first got up there. Take a listen to the Bengals head coach, Zach Taylor.
I put a lot of time into thinking, those situations, there's real money at stake. So I put a lot of time and energy into thinking about how to communicate, when to communicate. And so that's just how I handle that one. And yeah, Trey and I have spoken.
Is that your decision when to handle winter?
Yes. Yes.
Is there an expectation that you'll be here for game 22?
We'll see.
Distracting at all to have a player be doing an interview while practice is going on the field?
No, I mean, it was good to see him, good to have him in town. Practice is really wrapped up, for the most part. So I don't have any issue with that.
Is going through kind of similar situations like what you wore last year, does that maybe help prepare you in a way for how to handle when you have a star player kind of going through?
I think every situation is unique, and so again, it's every personality is different, every player is different, the timing of everything's different, and so you just adapt as you go with that stuff.
Apologies if it's kind of hard to hear the questions there, but basically he was asked about Trey, asked about texting him, asked about, is that his decision and so on, and some short answers from Zach Taylor, to say the least. I watched that press conference yesterday, and I have watched, I'm telling you, almost every single Zach Taylor press conference for the last 6 years because it's my job and because I'm a sick individual. That was a dude who came to that podium that day fed up. And it's May 20th. Zach feels pressure. Team has to start fast. Super Bowl window I just talked about. And another offseason is here with more drama, not only about Trey Hendrickson, but now you've got drama about a first-round pick in Shamar Stewart. We'll talk more about that next week. But you are, again, dealing with stuff that's not football stuff. And you have to be asked about it, and you have to answer it, and your star player just threw you under the bus, and your star player last year, Jamar Chase, kind of hung you out to dry, and you're getting blamed for stuff that you have nothing to do with. It's the life of an NFL head coach. It's especially the life of an NFL head coach in Cincinnati, and I feel for Zach when it comes to that. I really do. That is, yeah, I get why he's frustrated, to say the least. But he did kind of relax and open up a little bit more as the press conference went on, and was, more like himself. Let me finish the Trey conversation with this. There are times in this business where I will feel really convicted about something. I will feel very strongly about an opinion that I have and the way that I feel, and I'll feel strongly about it. And I'll go and ask my peers, my colleagues, sources, people I trust, and I'll kind of get their opinion on it to see, kind of feel it out. Am I wrong here? Is there something, is there any reason to doubt the way that I'm feeling? And sometimes there is. And sometimes those people disagree with me, and I'll stay the course of how I feel, and sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. But I will always go and try to talk to those people and figure out, people who generally know more than me, am I on the right path here? Am I thinking the same thing? Am I sniffing something here? Every single person that I've talked to about Trey Hendrickson feels the same way I do. Yeah, he deserves some more money. He doesn't deserve top flight money. And the Bengals aren't that worried about it. They've made their offer. He'll either play or he won't play, and nobody seems to care. I talked to people that said months ago they should trade him because it's not going to work out. And I've kind of been saying this from the very beginning. Max I'd give him is $28 million, maybe 30 if you want to get to that point. But I just look at this guy, and yeah, he's a good player, but he's not an athlete like those other guys are. He's not a game wrecker like those other guys are. I think some of his stats are skewed. He's below average in the run game. Every single person that I've talked to that I trust about Trey Hendrickson shares the same feelings that I share. And that, to me, tells me something about the future of Trey and the Bengals and about where this all is going. Maybe I'll end up being wrong. Maybe they sign him to a big extension. Maybe he has 17 and a half sacks for the next 3 years. And I would happily eat all the humble pie I could possibly shove in my gullet. But I don't think that's going to happen. And I feel strongly about that. All right, so we're basically out of time because I talked about that forever. So next week, we'll kind of dive into the schedule. Also have conversation from Zach and Joe about the schedule. And I don't know that it's as big of a deal as everybody is making it out to be, but there is a couple of things that need to be addressed when it comes to the Bengals schedule. Thankfully, we have all offseason to talk about that. Again, by the way, basically the same schedule for the Ball Don't Lie podcast, just going to be uploaded later in the day on Wednesdays moving forward. If you liked what you heard, you can follow me on Twitter at Auty Elmore, AutyElmore. You can listen to me weekdays from 12 to 3 on ESPN 1530 in Cincinnati. You can listen anywhere from the iHeartRadio app. If you like the podcast, please share it with somebody. Tell them about it. You can listen to that anywhere you get your podcast. This podcast, anywhere you get your podcast. You can also check it out on YouTube. I'm on TikTok. I'm going to get better at posting clips. I've been busier than a one-armed wallpaper hanger for the last couple of weeks, so I apologize for less clips. But we're going to be posting all that stuff, getting back to that as the summer goes along. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, we'll talk more about the schedule and any other drama that may unfold in what they're calling Treys of our lives. That's fun, isn't it? All right. Anyways, thanks so much for listening. Back again next week. Anything? I forget how to do this every time. Anyways, have fun. Be safe. Go Bucks.